Hello everyone, I'm Mark and welcome to All Natural Aquatics. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button and press on those thumbs up buttons. And today we're in Willingboro, New Jersey. We're actually at my wife's school. My wife's a school librarian. She's a 65-gallon tank in the library, and it's time to rescape it. For those of you who've been in the hobby for a while, you may remember this tank. It was subject of, I think it was a 4-part series on creating a Leiden-style aquascape in Tropical Fish Hobbyist magazine, but that's probably been, 12 years ago or so at this point, maybe even longer than that. But it's the same tank. We moved it since then to the library. The fish get summer break as well, just like the kids do. They come home and they actually go in a pond for the summer. We usually have more of them at the end of the summer than we have at the beginning of the summer, so works out well. Kind of at that point though, the population's not great, and I do have some Bulgarian seal angels ordered for myself this weekend. They're going to go in this tank to start out with, and then as they start to pair off, I'll put them in separate tanks and we'll start breeding those. At least that's the plan. We'll see how it goes and see if they actually come in. But today what we're going to do, the tank doesn't have a lot of plants in it at this point. You can kind of see what's behind me. I'll let you see that for a little bit. It's a little cloudy. I just did a big water change on it. Didn't quite fill it all the way up, so I wanted to be able to get in there without splashing too much. And I'm going to try to work from the sides so that you can see what I'm doing. Now, it's going to be a little bit of a kind of a stream of consciousness. I'm going to be planting things. I'll try to explain to you what I'm putting where and why I'm putting it there. I'm going to move around some of the plants that are already in the tank. I actually played around with the driftwood a little bit, have it in a slightly different spot than where it was before and on a different angle, but I think it works the way it is. When you come into the library, you're coming in from seeing the tank from the left to the right. The entrance is back on that side. So we want to pull the viewer all the way in to that right rear corner of the tank. And that's kind of the point of what we're trying to do. Now they'll have multiple focal points and you'll see those as we go along. The idea is to pull the viewer fully into the tank. It's going to be kind of a modified Leiden style tank, not a true Leiden tank. I'm not going to have a plant avenue in there. The driftwood will kind of serve somewhat as an avenue because it is angled upwards and it'll pull the eye in, but it's not going to be truly a Leiden style tank. So anyway, here we go. We'll get started with it. I'm going to start working from the back to the front. Doing this old school, I'm just using my fingers. I actually had a pair of planting tongs out and left them at home, so yeah, it works fine with the fingers. Been doing it that way. Hobbyists have been doing it that way for 100 years, actually more than that at this point. So you can see what I was talking about with that, a bit of an angle on the driftwood coming from low in the front up into the back. You can kind of get an idea of where it was before based on where the crypts are planted. So I'm going to move those crypts a little bit. But before we get to that, I have some jungle valve that I'm going to put in this corner because that's where the tubing is for the filter and the heater and all that kind of stuff. Tank also does have a substrate heater. And of course the current blew them all the way over to the other side. I'm going to reach across here, hopefully not fall in the tank myself. And it's Vallisneria, so it spreads by runner. Nice thing with that means that you don't have to plant a whole ton of them. You can give them time. If you're patient, they will fill in over time. They'll spread by runner and just cover an area. The gravel in this tank is the old school red flint or ebony blend, which is comes out of Wisconsin. I think it's the best gravel ever. Just love the way that it looks. It does buffer the pH for a while at least and does raise pH if you use it, when it's brand new, it's going to do that. It also has a lot of iron in it. So I find it to be a better plant substrate than any of the commercially available plant substrates. Matter of fact, if you take a magnet and run it over this gravel, you'll pick pieces of it up. There's that much iron in there. Again, what we're doing here with the valve is trying to create a little bit of a wall back here in the corner, which is actually going to pull the eye to it for one thing, but also going to cover up the filters and the heater over time. And let's see, I'll move the light back and forth so I can get access to the tank. Whoa. And hopefully we won't drop the light in the tank. That would be a really bad thing. It is a T5. Got 4 bulbs, and they're actually due to be replaced. I need to order new ones next week. Filter on the tank is a Sichi whale. I really like those a lot. They can sometimes be a pain to get started, but once they're running, man, they're really nice. And they're dead silent. Great filter. One more valve. Okay. And then, while we're here, move that out a little bit. Move these up a little bit closer. Really not going to move the crypts too terribly much on this side of the driftwood. Just move them a little closer into the wood. Okay. All right, now I think we'll go to the other side of the tank and start working a little bit from there as well. I just find it easier to work from the back to the front. Some people like to go other directions. A couple of things we need to think about as we're putting other plants in here, or we're putting any plants in here. You don't want plants with the same leaf shape or the same color to be in front of each other. And I really think that's a very important thing. If you have them that way, it just detracts from it. You don't really get all the perspective that you can get on the tank. You lose something in that translation. So what I'm going to plant over in this corner, move my chair to step up here. This is one that just comes in as a green temple plant out of Florida. It's a bunch plant. I'm going to take them out of the bunches here, plant them as individual plants. We'll spread them out a little bit. If you don't do that, you don't get enough light to the lower leaves, and they end up looking like that, where you got a whole bunch of stem before you get to the leaves because they're in too tight. And that's, after they've been in the store for a few weeks, that's how they end up looking. It's kind of hard to avoid that. I have 3 bunches here, which I think is 9 plants. Nice thing, any of the bunch type plants, wherever you plant them, when they start getting taller than you want, you just clip them off or pinch them off right below a node on the stem. And then you take that top cutting and plant it somewhere else. And then I like to go back down on that original stem and cut it off or pinch it off right above the next node down. I find that doing that tends to make the plants branch more. They're not going to branch every time, but they'll do it much more frequently. And that will give you bushier plants, more natural looking plants over time. And these are going to have big leaves. Hope you can see the new growth on there. There is quite a bit of color in these. They start out all green because they're grown out of water. That's the other reason that they drop leaves when we get them into the store. Those first couple of weeks, those are all immersed leaves, and it is a different leaf form underwater. But there is going to be quite a bit of color on these. You get some yellows and some pinks and some reds in there, as well as the greens. So it really looks nice. And more or less a bit of a triangle here. Really take up that left rear corner. Come about halfway forward on the front there. Come down and get the next one. So those are going to be large leaves. So we can put something with smaller leaves or different shaped leaves in front of that. I think what we're going to do, actually, you know what? Before I do that, I'm going to finish that planting across the back. And contrary, to be very different than those in terms of leaf structure back there, The next ones I'm going to use coming across are Rotala. You know, this might be indica, might be rotundifolia. They're very similar. They get sold as each other. You know, it doesn't really matter in terms of how it looks. But if you're, you know, wanting to be specific, you might need to try to key them out from flowers and things like that, so that you can make sure you get points for the right ones on your HAP programs, your horticultural award program for your local club if you have one, and hopefully you do. If you don't have a club in your area, why haven't you started one? It's a whole lot more fun to have a club where you can see people, interact with people, see fish, trade fish around, get speakers to come in. That really beats whatever you do on the internet. Now the rotundifolia or rotala here, I like to put a little bit tighter. These are really narrow plants. The leaves are very small. They will get bright pink if they're really happy. If they're not really happy, they're green, but they still do really well. This is a very, very easy plant to grow. And I usually plant them as twos rather than as single plants, but still give a little bit of space in between. And these are really putting a lot of roots down from all over the stems. So I could take these down and cut them very short, but I'm not going to do that because I want to get the height. Leaning on the light, it moves on me, hoping I don't knock it in. This would be an easier reach from the front, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So now I'm going to come a little bit forward. And you know, over time, this grows so quickly, I'll have a lot of cuttings from this. I'll really fill this area in, make it nice and dense. I want to fill in this area behind the driftwood. We're running into the old planting of crypts there. I'm going to probably move them up just a little bit. Maybe not though, I may just leave them right about where they're at. And this pink will really contrast nicely with the grassy leaves of the Valsneria too. So it'll serve to help, again, bring your eye into the corner of the tank. All right, I hope you can see that. Of course, you know, this tank's been running for 15 years or so. So as I get in there and work a little bit, even though I just did a gravel vac and water change, still stirring a lot of crap up. So you're gonna have to bear with me on that. Okay. And you know, as I'm looking at this, I'm seeing something that I'm going to actually change. I'm going to bring these crypts more in line over here, and I'm going to put another taller planting in this corner here. You can see this is not something I really gave a lot of thought to. Just looked around the shop last night and said, oh, those look good. Oh, I can use those. I can use some of those, and grab plants accordingly. But there wasn't a lot of thought given to this. I do really recommend, if you're new at aquascaping, draw it out. Have a plan, you know, attack it logically. If you draw it out first, you'll know exactly what you want to do. You'll know what you need. It's just easier to deal with. I've done so many of them over the years that, you know, I can kind of just look at what I have available and make something up in my head. But you'll get to that point, but you're not going to start there. I think I like that. So what I'm going to do now is get these in the light where I can see which one's which. This is a Mannia senegalensis. Kind of a orangey reddish leaf. It's really attractive, kind of leaf bends down a little bit. Sometimes called the apple leaf plant. So it's going to give me a little bit of height in this corner. It's also going to give me some real red over here, so again, we're going to help pull the viewer all the way to this side. I'm doing hand movements when I'm off the side of the tank, so I don't know if you can see them or not. Move the light or I will knock that in. And again, you can see these have been in the store a few weeks. They've dropped a lot of the lower leaves, but those few lower leaves that are left are green. You know, they're the original leaves from growing out of water. It's much easier, much more efficient to commercially culture plants out of water than it is underwater. You know, most of our aquarium plants are only underwater for part of the year in the wild. So growing them out of water is very easy to do. There's, you know, a lot more CO2 available. They grow much more quickly. They ship better when they're accustomed to being dry. You don't have to worry about them drying out and shipping. I do want to leave some free space in the front here too. I don't want to run plants all the way to the glass in this tank. I'm going to put a school of something in there. I haven't decided quite what yet. But I'm going to put something in there to roam around and maybe keep the bottom a little cleaner than it's been. So it's a deep tank for cories. So I'm probably more likely to use some type of loaches or something along those lines. All right, so there we go. You can see how that really sets that off in front of the driftwood too. You know, that red really pulls your eye to it. Really a nice looking plant. That's actually one of my favorite plants. And as I'm looking at this and thinking about this, I am going to move those crypts that were in the middle there. I'm not going to plant them just yet, though. I'm just going to take them out. And I am going to come around and you're going to get to look at my best side here for a minute as I'm turned around to you. Some different hydro in here now, in that spot. Messing up the tank. Clouding up quite a bit doing this. Okay, so again, very different leaf shape here, different color in the leaf than anything right around it. And these hydros are fairly large growing, fairly wide growing, so you need to make sure you're leaving a little bit of space in between the plants so that they get enough light all the way down to the bottom. This is an Anubias hybrid. This is Nanji, which is a hybrid of Anubias nana, which is Barteri variety nana, with Anubias gigantea. Put that on the wood. A hole in the wood there where we can put those through, put the roots through, and it'll just grab on and grow right on there. further over is the crypt. Something else that has to go in that spot. What I consider to be the best foreground focal point in the hobby. This is Nymphaea rubra, the red tie lily. I like that there. Let me go a little over. Yeah, a little more off. So. You know what? As I'm looking at that, those two are too close together there. So I'm going to move the Anubias up here. So I can move that back there to where I had it initially. So I think that's a better spot for it. Now, that is a true water lily, which means that it will put up floating pads. You don't want to let it do that. If it does that successfully, all the new leaves are going to be pads, and what you're going to have is a really dark tank with a whole bunch of lily pads floating on the surface, blocking all the light. And in a planted tank, that just is not a recipe for a successful tank. As you can see, we've kind of got a little bit of our angle here with the driftwood. Pulling your eye in, we've got a focal point right here in front of that, so it's going to really grab you and pull you there. Now we're going to work on a focal point on the other side. Madagascar lace plant. Don't ever be intimidated by these. They are nowhere near as difficult as people will tell you that they are. They're actually a very easy plant to grow. In my experience, they actually do better in hard water than they do in soft water. I've had these grow and not go dormant for years at a time in really hard water. And I mean, pHs above 8, hardness at like 450 parts per million. When you get that carbonate hardness too, you got a lot of carbonate source, get a lot of carbonate source available for the plant to utilize and grow. And the Anubias didn't stay, so we'll have to put that one back in. All right, that'll work. It's going to stay this time. Actually, I think more plants than I really need. As I'm looking at this. That's some Ludwigia that I'm not going to use. Scripts that I pulled up are pretty green. I'm going to continue with them around the edge. One thing I don't like a lot about that piece of driftwood is that this end that's exposed here is rather flat. It's an old potted one. Been in this tank for a long time. So I'm gonna put some of these more green crypts around the end of that. So we'll soften that up. Won't realize quite how flat that is once we get more leaves on these crypts. Yeah, you got some roots sticking out, so what? They'll kind of pull themselves down, or I'll trim them off in a week or two. Not any big deal there. Roots tangled up with the lace plant. All right. Now I'm going to put a few new crypts in. These are red Wentai. We don't really have any red on this side of the tank. So that'll pull that in. Give us a tie back to the other side with the colors of the leaves. You do want that all to offset and kind of one feed off the other. Okay. Actually got a little indentation in there, but I don't really mind that as I'm looking at this. You know, I may put something really low growing in there to cover as bottom cover in the front, but I'm not really inclined to do that. I said, I actually think I like this the way it is. I have a Ludwigia and I have a sword plant as well, but I don't think I'm going to put either of them in. I think I'm going to let it go just the way it is. And then we'll try to give you an update on this in a few weeks and come back and show you what it's looking like when it's kind of growing in a bit. So I'm going to get in there now and get out some of those leaves that are floating around loose and finish filling it up. Double check the timer on the lights, the programming on the lights, and we'll go from there. So, hope you enjoyed that. I'll be back in a minute. Hello again, everyone. We're back for another look at the 65 gallon that was rescaped last week. I only have a few minutes here today, so I'm not really going to work on the tank. I did want to add a couple of new fish, and those are already in. I added a school of silver-tip tetras. See those guys cruising around up there. And a school of sockolopi, which is one of the bleeding heart types. It's the one that you don't really see as often. It's a really nice fish. But you can see we've done pretty well with this. Aside from the algae on the glass, a little more than I was expecting. Anubias looks good. See new growth on the Amania, and you can see how the leaves are bending down, curving downward like I said they would last week. The valves look like they're settling in okay. You can see new growth on the Rotala, new growth on the pinnate hygro, new growth on the Nomophylla. The crypts look like they're settled in pretty well. Madagascar lace has lost a couple of leaves, but looks all right. The old ones that we've moved around look like they're settled in just fine. And the red tie lily does have one leaf that's heading up toward the surface. I will probably remove that one today. And we'll back this off, give you that whole look. Obviously a lot clearer today. It's had some time for the filter to run. The fish look great. Yeah, here's the odd one out. And it's unfortunately a female. It's the only one I have. This is about a gladiator. Probably gonna come up and look at me, so I'm not gonna see you by the side. There we go. Had those out in the pond a couple years ago and left them out there just a little bit too long and lost the male. But the female survived. I've kind of been looking for another male, but haven't found one close. Yeah, we'll just pull back out. Let you see this a little bit. But you can get a pretty good idea how things are going to grow out and fill in and see where the leaf shapes are and the colors and how everything's going to compare and contrast. I hope you've enjoyed this. We'll catch you again another time. Thank you.